Ladies and gentlemen, imagine a man standing at the edge of a cliff, not because he wants to jump, but because he's desperate to find space to breathe now. What if I told you that the love he craves from you isn't found in your closeness, but in your willingness to step away? This isn't about rejection, it's about resurrection. The masculine heart often retreats not to escape love, but to earn the strength to carry it. And yet we smother, we chase, we demand answers in moments when silence is screaming its own truth. Have you ever tried fixing a flower by pulling its petals apart? Strange how we do that with people too. There's a terrifying beauty in stepping back. It forces the man to meet himself in your absence, to feel the vacuum where your presence once stood, and in that quiet abyss, something profound begins to stir. But wait, what happens when he doesn't come back? Or worse, what if he returns different? Good. Because that's where the real story begins, and it's nothing like what you've been told. Distance creates desire. Space allows a man to feel your value, not take it for granted. This simple truth often gets lost in a world that romanticizes constant connection, instant replies, and an overwhelming urge to always be available. But relationships don't grow in noise. They grow in depth, and sometimes depth is carved not by closeness, but by absence. When you step back, when you allow a pause in the rhythm of your presence, something powerful begins to unfold. The man is no longer immersed in the comfort of your constant attention. Instead, he is left to face the echo of your absence, and in that silence, he begins to hear the weight of what you brought into his life. It's not manipulation. It's nature. Human beings, especially men, are wired to pursue, to earn, to hunt for what they truly value. When everything is handed over freely, when love is overly available without boundaries or balance, it begins to feel like background noise, present but unnoticed. Like the hum of an air conditioner on a summer day, always there but never fully appreciated until it's turned off. Then suddenly he notices the heat, the lack, the shift. That's where longing is born. Men don't emotionally process things the way many women do. They often need solitude to feel, to reflect, to understand. And if you're always there fixing, talking, filling every gap, he doesn't get the chance to miss you. He doesn't get the opportunity to realize the emotional safety, the intellectual stimulation, the quiet strength you brought into his life. Your absence becomes a mirror, showing him what your presence really meant. It's in the void that appreciation grows. It's in the stillness that value is remembered. There's a fear that stepping back means losing someone, that if you stop chasing, they'll walk away. But the truth is, if someone leaves because you created healthy space, they were never standing still with you in the first place. Men are not drawn to pressure, they're drawn to polarity, to the dance between presence and absence, closeness and space. A man's emotional engagement is often activated by challenge, not conflict, but the challenge of earning something meaningful. When everything comes too easily, it loses its weight. And here's the uncomfortable part. Being deeply available too soon, too often, can actually prevent a man from emotionally investing. When you're always the one reaching out, always initiating, always staying one emotional step ahead, you rob him of the chance to step forward on his own. Stepping back allows him to recalibrate, to ask himself, what do I want? Do I miss her? Was she grounding me in ways I didn't even see? It becomes his decision, his pursuit, his choice. And love that is chosen, not coerced, becomes a commitment that sticks. We often think that love is proved through constant closeness, but sometimes love is proved through confident distance. The ability to hold your space, to honor your time, to maintain your individuality, it speaks volumes. It tells him that your world doesn't revolve around his presence, and paradoxically, that makes him want to be part of it more. Because strength, confidence, and self-respect are magnetizing. They draw people in not by force, but by energy. By aura, you become less of a convenience and more of a mystery. Less predictable, more powerful. He begins to wonder, to question, to desire. Stepping back doesn't mean disappearing. It means choosing when to be present. It's about quality over quantity. It's about boundaries that protect your peace and energy. When a man sees that you're not afraid of losing him, he starts fearing the loss of you. That shift alone changes everything. The dynamic evolves. You're no longer waiting for validation, you're inviting it. And when a man starts to reflect on what you were in his life and what life feels like without you, he steps into a place of emotional growth that he wouldn't have otherwise accessed. This emotional stretch he experiences in your absence is essential. It forces him to take ownership of his feelings, his intentions, his next move. You're no longer the safety net. He has to decide whether he wants to leap. And when he does, it's because he truly wants to, not because you dragged him into the conversation. That choice is everything. That's when love becomes a conscious decision, not a convenience, and that's where deeper connection begins. Emotional independence invites respect, not resistance. This truth often contradicts the mainstream advice of always being emotionally available, constantly sharing, and leaning in at every moment. But the foundation of a powerful magnetic presence lies in your ability to be whole on your own. When you are emotionally independent, you are not seeking validation through someone else's actions. You are not waiting for someone to regulate your moods, give your life direction, or tell you who you are. Instead, you come into a relationship already full, and that fullness demands a different kind of respect. A person who is emotionally grounded carries themselves with a certain calm confidence. They don't react impulsively. They don't beg for reassurance. They don't crumble at the first sign of emotional distance. And because of that, they are seen as someone who can be trusted, someone whose emotions are not a burden to carry but a strength to lean on. This doesn't mean being cold or distant, it means being stable. There is a quiet power in knowing that your peace does not depend on someone else's behavior, that if they walk away, you will still stand. In the beginning stages of relationships, especially, emotional independence is often misunderstood. Some see it as disinterest or even ego. But true independence is not a wall, it's a boundary. It communicates, I know my worth. I know how to hold space for others, but I also know how to hold space for myself. And the people who are emotionally immature may resist that. They may test it, try to provoke a reaction, push boundaries to see if you'll chase. But the ones who are truly ready, who value depth and substance, they won't resist it. They'll respect it. When you are emotionally independent, you no longer operate from fear. You stop fearing loss. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing silence. And without fear driving your behavior, you start to attract relationships that are based on mutual choice, not emotional need. You're not choosing someone because you need them to complete you. You're choosing them because you want to share your life with them. That subtle shift changes everything. It changes how you speak, how you respond, how you handle conflict. It gives you the ability to pause instead of panic, to listen instead of defend. Men in particular are highly sensitive to the energy of neediness. It creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance. But when a woman stands firmly in her emotional independence, it disrupts the old pattern. It removes the expectation that he has to perform emotionally at all times. It gives him the space to be real, to open up on his own terms, without the fear of being smothered or suffocated. And ironically, that space often invites more emotional openness, not less, because no one wants to open up to someone who is already drowning. But when someone is emotionally stable, they become a safe place to land. Emotional independence also changes the way love is expressed. It becomes more intentional, more honest, more balanced. You don't give out of obligation or insecurity. You give out of choice. And when you're not emotionally dependent on someone, you're more likely to hold them accountable. You're not afraid to speak your truth, to call out inconsistency, to walk away when respect is lost. That firmness doesn't scare healthy people, it attracts them. It shows that you have standards, not walls, boundaries, not baggage. The idea that emotional independence pushes people away is rooted in a fear-based mindset. The truth is, it's emotional overdependence that pushes people away. It makes them feel trapped, obligated, watched. But when you can self-regulate, when you can handle your emotions without spiraling, when you don't need someone else to constantly soothe you, you become a refreshing presence in a world that often demands too much from others and too little from ourselves. You show that your love is not a leash, it's a choice. This kind of inner strength also makes heartbreak survivable. You don't fall apart when things don't go as planned. You grieve, but you don't collapse. You heal, but you don't become bitter, because your identity wasn't built around someone else. You never abandon yourself to hold someone else's hand. That kind of self-respect creates an energy that is rare, and anything rare is valued. When you are emotionally independent, you stop trying to convince others of your worth. You don't chase love. You allow it to meet you where you are. And the ones who can't, you let them go without needing to explain why. A man can only pursue love when he's given the freedom to choose it. Real love isn't born out of pressure, expectation, or emotional obligation. It flourishes in freedom. The masculine energy thrives on autonomy, on the space to decide, to move, to act on his own terms. When a man feels forced, when he senses that his affection is being demanded rather than inspired, it creates a resistance within him that even he may not fully understand. He might withdraw, disconnect, or feel a quiet resentment he can't articulate. But when he has allowed the space to choose, truly choose, something awakens in him. A sense of ownership, of direction, of personal truth. And it's from that place that genuine love begins. Many people confuse love with control. They think that by constantly showing up, constantly reaching out, constantly trying to be everything to a man, they'll earn his heart. But that's not how healthy masculine energy connects. Men don't fall in love with pressure. They fall in love with presence, particularly the kind that doesn't try to contain them. When a woman stands in her self-worth, when she doesn't chase, when she allows a man the dignity to approach her on his own, she activates a deeper level of respect within him. He no longer feels like love is being shoved into his hands. He feels like he is being invited to something sacred, and that invitation must be accepted, not coerced. The key lies in understanding pursuit. Pursuit is an internal drive, not a response to guilt or fear. If a man doesn't feel the desire to pursue, to invest, to engage, it doesn't mean he's broken. It means he hasn't found a reason strong enough within himself to move forward. That reason cannot be given to him by begging, convincing, or overgiving. It must rise naturally from within his own emotional ecosystem. When you back off, when you stop trying to micromanage the relationship, when you stop tying your happiness to how fast he texts back, you create a vacuum. And that vacuum gives him the rare opportunity to reflect, to feel, to miss you, and most importantly, to choose you. This is not about playing games. It's about understanding polarity. Masculine energy is naturally drawn to challenge, to discovery, to the process of earning something valuable. When love is handed over without boundaries, without pause, it becomes difficult for a man to attach meaning to it. It becomes a default, not a decision. And men don't build their lives around defaults, they build around what they've actively decided is worth their time, their heart, their presence. So when you step back not to punish, but to protect your peace, you are not abandoning love, you are honoring its truth. You are allowing it to be something real, something he must reach for, not just receive. The irony is that the more space you allow, the more clarity he gains. When you're always there, it's easy for him to take you for granted, not out of cruelty, but because he's never had to imagine life without your presence. Space creates contrast. It forces him to ask, what does life feel like without her energy? And that question is far more powerful than any words you could ever speak. If he finds peace in your absence, then you've saved yourself from giving love to someone who didn't truly want it. But if he feels the weight of your silence, the shift in energy, the missing heartbeat of your connection, he will return. Not out of habit, but out of choice. Freedom is a test of a man's heart. When you release him from your emotional grip, when you stop managing his actions and stop reacting to every small distance, you give him a test he cannot cheat. He must decide. And that decision, if it is made in your absence, will carry more weight than any decision made while you were holding his hand through every moment. Real love survives space. In fact, it needs space to stretch, to breathe, to deepen. When you stop trying to pull him closer, you give him the sacred space to step forward. And the steps he takes in freedom are the most honest ones he'll ever take. You'll see how he moves when no one is watching. You'll see if he chooses you, not because you made it easy, but because he couldn't stay away. That's when love becomes meaningful, not when it's demanded, but when it's discovered. Not when it's expected, but when it's chosen. And a man who chooses you in freedom is a man who is truly present, invested, and awake to the value of what you bring into his life. Stepping back shifts the power dynamic from pressure to presence. In many relationships, especially during emotionally intense moments, there's a tendency to push, to explain more, to fix things, to prove worth, to keep talking until the other person understands. But that urgency, though rooted in good intention, often has the opposite effect. It creates emotional noise. It becomes heavy. The more you push, the more the other person feels they must retreat just to catch their breath. And in that dynamic, connection begins to slip. But something powerful happens the moment you step back, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in conscious self-awareness. The pressure evaporates, and in its place, presence quietly takes the lead. Presence is not about doing more. It's about being more grounded, more self-respecting, more attuned to the energy of the moment. When you step back, you are no longer chasing a reaction, no longer hunting for reassurance, no longer trying to control the outcome. That shift, although subtle, is deeply felt. It says, I trust myself enough to not need to force this. That kind of inner stillness has power. It doesn't beg for love, it radiates it. It doesn't panic when someone pulls away, it watches. And in that calm watchfulness, you actually become more magnetic. Because presence, unlike pressure, invites curiosity, reflection, and even desire. A lot of people confuse stepping back with giving up, but they are not the same. Giving up is rooted in defeat. Stepping back is rooted in strength. It says, I know what I bring, I know what I feel, but I won't demand what must be freely given. When someone feels your presence without the weight of expectation, they begin to respond to you differently. They no longer feel the need to defend, to run, to shut down. You've removed the invisible hands that were clinging too tightly, and in that release, something beautiful begins to happen. They begin to lean in, not because they have to, but because they want to. This shift in power dynamics is not about control, it's about clarity. Pressure is born from fear, fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. Presence is born from peace. When you're present, you're in alignment with yourself. You don't chase clarity, you allow it to come. You don't try to manipulate someone's feelings, you observe them. You give space for the truth to emerge on its own, and that kind of space can be incredibly confronting to the other person. Suddenly, they can't rely on your emotional labor to make the relationship function. They have to meet you halfway, or they risk losing something of substance. Men in particular respond strongly to this change in energy. When a woman stops chasing, stops explaining, stops emotionally overreaching, he feels it immediately. It's a disruption to the pattern he may have gotten comfortable with. The silence speaks louder than the words ever could. And in that silence, he has to start thinking, why isn't she reacting? Why isn't she explaining herself? Has she really stepped away? That pause in the dynamic forces him to reevaluate not just you, but himself, his actions, his words, his feelings. And that pause is where respect can begin to grow, because you didn't try to drag him into your world. You invited him in and let him decide. When you operate from presence, your energy becomes clear and contained. You're no longer leaking emotion, no longer scattering your attention, no longer desperate for emotional crumbs. That kind of centeredness is deeply attractive, not because it plays games, but because it creates a sense of stability. You're showing, not telling, that you don't need to be anyone's project, that you don't need fixing, saving, or constant validation. You know who you are, and that certainty allows the other person to see you clearly, sometimes for the very first time. The dynamic of presence over pressure creates space for authentic connection. It allows conversations to be deeper, more real. It invites vulnerability, not through force, but through trust. The person in front of you starts to sense that they can breathe with you, not feel judged or hurried or smothered. You are not emotionally reacting to every dip in the road. You're walking your path with grace, allowing others to walk beside you if they choose. And if they don't, you continue on without collapsing. That kind of emotional stability doesn't just earn respect, it commands it. When you step back, you are not just changing the relationship, you are changing yourself. You are taking ownership of your energy, your peace, your presence. You are saying, I will not abandon myself to hold on to anyone else. That boundary becomes your power. And power, when rooted in self-awareness, doesn't push, it pulls. It doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't react, it responds. And in that shift, the whole dynamic of love begins to move in a healthier, more balanced direction.